very.
And I'm gonna
There's
check.
something.
Is it here? We're checking our phones just to make sure it's on there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, it is.
Okay,
All right,
cool.
cool. All right,
There we go.
very good. So we have, how many people are you
We
seeing?
got four
Waiting.
people.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Hi, Mom.
Our parents. No.
Not even joking.
That's too
That's
funny.
very cool. All right.
All right. So,
And we have our moderator friend in here
oh
as
yeah,
well.
so we got a
Yeah.
moderator in here, Sony Emma from Sony's Place.
Oh, Emma's here. Okay, cool. Cool, cool,
All
cool.
right.
Oh, that was me. Sorry. Okay.
All right. So, for everyone that is joining right now and watching the replay, we have Joe and Sandra here. They do our taxes, and we always thought about every time we go to conferences, we always notice that there's nothing about saving money or how you can, do
Nobody's
the best.
talking finances.
Yeah. Or even first aid, buddy care, things that kind of not just all homesteading but personal way of life.
But there's a lot of homesteaders that have a business from home.
Yes. So we decided to, I've been talking with Joe now for a few weeks now, and we decided to put this together here and kind of give their input on that. So Joe and Sandra, go ahead and introduce yourself and how long you been in the game.
All right. Well, hi, I'm Joe Madden. I'm a CPA here in Denison, Texas. I've had a practice here since 1997, I believe. So it's what, 20 odd years now. My focus for my tax practice is mostly what I call blue collar workers, the salt of the earth. So I deal with a lot of farmers, ranchers, mechanics, that type of thing. Because I really enjoy helping, the hard-working folks save on their taxes and help them with their accounting and all that good stuff. And Sandra?
I'm Sandra Madden. I am new to all of this accounting and farmsteading kind of thing. I had never seen a chicken in person in my entire life until about, 2 years ago when we got our own and bought a farm and got some animals. And as far as accounting goes, I spent 20 years in nonprofit management and church ministry kind of stuff, and came into this just a few years ago, and now I've taken some classes in accounting and have my EA, just waiting for the IRS to give me their stamp of approval on that, and enjoy helping people the same way that Joe does. In fact, our business motto is that nobody goes into business to do accounting except accountants.
That's awesome. And you just got your certification I saw
Right.
recently.
Yeah. I had to go do some tests and online classes and go do some tests down in Dallas and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm just waiting for the IRS to do their part any day.
Uh-oh.
I know. It could be a while.
So you were saying you do mostly with blue collars and stuff like that. We got a lot of homesteaders on here. We talked about how if they're doing this as a hobby or whatever that may be, that this might not be something for them. How could they, what would they benefit from you? How would they benefit from going to a tax person from being a homesteader?
With a business.
Right. Well, that's the big question right there is business. The first question you got to ask yourself is, do you really have a business or do you just have a chicken? Because it matters. If you have a business, you have to really be in it for a profit motive. It doesn't mean you have to be making profits. It just means you have to be trying your hardest to make profits. And that gives you a business. And then once you have a business, then there's a lot of deductions and accounting that you have to do. If you just happen to have a few chickens that you raise for meat and eggs and you keep it all yourself or share with your family, that's not really a business. And then you really don't need to worry about tracking your income and expenses from your farm because you don't have a business. So that's the key distinction we got to get over first is, do we have a business or do we just have a chicken? There is a third option, and that one is if you happen to sell some eggs every now and then, or you go in halvesies with a hog or something like that, and that's a hobby. And Sandra knows a lot about the hobby, so I'm going to let her talk about the hobbies.
Well, if you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And unfortunately, hobbies, you can't write off your expenses. You just get to declare your income because the IRS says all income counts. So if you want to make sure that your hobby that you actually have a business instead of a hobby, there's some things that you need to do. You need to show your profit in 2 of the last 5 years. And it doesn't have to be a big profit. It just needs to be profitability within 2 of the last 5 years. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a really good one. You need to keep records. Keep records of all your transactions, the things you buy, the things you sell, who you sell them to, things like that. How much time are you putting into this? Are you just doing a couple hours a month as the mood hits you, or are you out there day in and day out doing farm chores? Are you advertising your farm? Are you marketing the eggs that you're selling, or is it just, people just happen to notice that you have them? Do you know what you're doing? Have you done this before? Do you have any experience in doing this? Do you have any sort of expertise in what you're doing? Do you have any sort of business experience? Have you had a successful business in the past? Can you expect to make a profit doing what you're doing in the next few years? Those are all some questions that you need to answer, and the things that you need to make sure you're doing in order for your farmstead to be considered a business rather than a hobby.
Okay. Now, how would someone go about setting up a business so that way they plan on making some money? How would they go about setting up a business so that way they can start getting the deductions and
If your
expenses?
intention is to be profitable at some point, you have to start somewhere. So, what advice do you get?
There's a lot of bad advice out there on social media.
Well, time out there.
Yes.
Don't take advice from TikTok unless that person is a CPA or an EA or something. But there's a lot of crazy advice on TikTok that is entirely wrong. So be careful who you get your advice from.
It's on the internet. It has to be true.
Exactly. But like Sandra said, we're trying to get over the hobby loss rule. So even if you sell $2,000 worth of eggs, if you're really not working it for a profit, that's a hobby. And as a result, you don't get to deduct anything from a hobby. You have to pay tax on the income you make from your hobby, but your expenses are just a loss or just washed off. You don't get to deduct a thing. So now that we've determined, okay, we are going to go and try and have a business, that's some of the tests Sandra was talking about. How much time are you putting into it and all that? So if you're working at it full time, you're really advertising it. We have signs out front saying eggs for sale, and we're selling daily. So it's easier to say we have a business now. Now that we have a business, we can deduct our expenses, and that's where all the fun comes in. Because when you have revenue, before you pay taxes, you get to subtract your expenses from. Everybody calls it deducting it. What can I deduct here? What can I deduct there? That's what we're trying to get to, because you pay tax on your bottom line, your net profit. Gross income minus expenses equals your net, and that's what we pay tax on. So the name of the game now is to get our net profit as low as possible so we can save the most taxes. So step 1 is to record everything you spend to help you make that money. People always ask me, is there a list of what I can deduct for my farm or my business? And I say, well, there is no magic list, because it would be a mile long, because what I'm deducting for my farm is entirely different than what you guys might buy for your farm. So the IRS gives you some criteria you have to achieve to make it deductible. And the first one is ordinary and necessary. Is it an ordinary expense? Isn't it a necessary expense? And again, that can be different from everybody. Having a helicopter on my little 18-acre farm is not really necessary, but a helicopter on King Ranch with bigger than Rhode Island is necessary for those guys. So they could deduct a helicopter where I couldn't. But, when you get to ordinary and necessary, it's the 99% of it's the easy stuff. The feed, the buckets, the fencing, whatever you're buying to maintain your crop or your animals, we definitely want to track those things in some form or fashion so that we can subtract them from our revenue at the end of the year.
So, leading to that, what is the best way to track your expenses and your revenue?
Well, there's an app for that.
There is an app for that.
It seems like everything costs money, though. Like apps
But-
and everything.
There's lots of free ways too. Excel is a great one. If you're not making
Google Sheets.
tens of thousands of transactions a month, maybe you go to the feed store once a month, you go to Tractor Supply 5 times a day, because everybody goes to Tractor Supply 5 times a day. But you can just make columns in a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are super easy to use. Just make a column. One column might say feed, another column might say repairs, another one might just say general supplies. And then as you buy stuff that matches up with one of those columns, put that dollar amount in that column and then add it up. Don't get crazy with 10,000 columns or anything. We want to keep it short and sweet and simple. So, I usually 10 to 15 categories is enough to track nearly all your expenses.
What categories would you recommend people to do?
Well, there's always the catch-all of miscellaneous, which is fine. Some things are just random. You buy that one $10 thing that you don't know what to put with it, and that's fine. But we want to avoid miscellaneous expenses that are a huge chunk of your expense listing. So I really tell people, look and see where you're spending your money on. Right now with feed and hay and all that, that's probably a big category for you. So you want to have one column definitely that says feed and hay. I always make another column that's just general supplies. So when you go buy scoops and buckets or whatnot, it goes in there. Vet bills, if you have livestock, your vet bills might be high, so you want a column for vet bills. Repairs and maintenance is another big one.
Put your worming medicines in there, your antibiotics, all that kind of stuff can go in there. Your basic repairs and equipment and tools. You need another hammer, you need a fence stretcher, you need, some sort of tools. Put
Yeah,
that
we're
in
always
another category.
Things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Emma wanted to know-
Materials.
Emma wants to know, can you use zip ties as an expense write-off?
I wouldn't make a category of zip ties, but that would definitely be in supplies.
Yes, that's a big
Unless-
supply.
Unless you use a lot of zip ties.
Zip ties, duct tape, bubble gum.
Yes.
Right, all right.
If you have a chicken coop, you probably got 1,000 zip ties on it.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yes, yes, we do.
yeah. Okay.
So one of the other things I want to point out is there are some special treatments for some bigger things. If you go buy the $30,000 tractor, big items that are going to last you more than 1 year and generally cost, say, more than $1,000 or so, have to be treated a little separately. We call these fixed assets. So you might spend $10,000 to fence in your farm. You're not going to be able to write it all off in 1 year. Usually there are some caveats to that. And so we'll have to do what's called depreciate it. And we'll depreciate that fence or that tractor over a certain amount of time. Oh, why don't you talk about auto tracking mileage and stuff?
Oh, mileage. Mileage is fun because
There's an app for that.
there's an app for that too. Back to the apps for your receipts. If you have a mobile phone, you can scan your receipts. Your accountant doesn't want your receipts, but the IRS, if they should ever come calling, will want to see your receipts. So you can scan them. You don't need to keep the pieces of paper. Scan them and categorize them, send them off to OneDrive or Dropbox or something like that. We like Genius Scan. It's not a free app, but then again, if you have a business, that's a deductible expense. So you can include that in there. Otherwise, I know we have iPhones, so the Notes app will do it for free. Things like that. But back to mileage now. You do have to differentiate between your personal and your business or your farm mileage. That your trip to McDonald's might not count, but if you're going to Tractor Supply and hit McDonald's on the way, that would be a different kind of story. That you wouldn't track it separately, but it would be a trip. And we like the app called Mile IQ.
Yes.
That is excellent because it'll note your trips. It follows you around, GPS all automatically, and then you can just, when you have some free time, swipe right or left, whether it's a business or a personal trip.
So your your trip from the farm to Tractor Supply or the feed, so you can write that mileage off?
Absolutely. Any mileage you do for the farm is deductible. If you go to the bank to deposit your egg money, that's mileage. And so that's why I try to tell people, don't go to town just because you guys need some groceries. Go to town to go to Tractor Supply and just happen to stop by the grocery store on the way home. So we can write some of that mileage off.
And our bank is all the way near Dallas.
Yeah. Unfortunately, being out in the rural area, there's no bank in the area.
I buy a fancy grocery store too.
Yeah.
Darn.
So plan this.
So, we got some chicks hipping. North 44 Farmstead said, do you
all file a different schedule for your farms? I do a Schedule C for our wood shop, but not sure if the farm stuff needs a separate filing.
at this point? I think for a Schedule F for a farm, right?
Exactly. Schedule F is for a farm. Schedule C would be for other businesses like his wood shop. That's very good. There's really no difference. The taxes generally end up the same. If you accidentally put your chickens on a Schedule C, you're going to pay the same tax. The only reason it matters is that for some weird instances where there might be presidential disasters, farms have some special tax treatments that allow you to either delay your tax payments or other things. And so that's why you want to put your farm, anything to do with raising crops or animals would go on a Schedule F.
Oh, okay. CC's Texas Garden, yes. Same with your internet and cell phones. Yeah, you can use that as a...
Those are deductible, but we also need to differentiate your personal and business use, kind of a percentage
right.
on that.
Just because you look up farm prices on the internet doesn't mean you get to write off 100% of your internet, especially if you have kids over there playing Call of Duty 24/7 on your internet. So you kind of have to allocate it out. You need to make a reasonable estimate of how much time you're using your internet for farm use or business use and how much time you're using it to watch Netflix and Hulu. And if you decide, well, it's 75% personal and 25% business, well, now you can write off 25% of your internet expenses. Same thing with like your cell phone, any expenses. No matter what you do, you have to be able to document that it's business use before you can write it off. And if it's a mixed use, then we have to allocate it in some form or fashion.
Yeah, because we get a lot of people, they talk about, because of course, everybody knows we go to a lot of conferences and we use those as education and networking benefits, plus with our content. And so we tell them, that sometimes it is expensive, but you could write it off. And
yeah,
everything.
that's a big thing we hear when we talk about going to conferences, that people do kind of harp about, the expense of it and it being difficult. But a lot that are fellow, like a content creator, like we're a content creator as well as having
there goes the rural
lots for a second.
internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
There,
here now.
there we are.
Okay. Yeah. So you're going to conferences is a dual purpose, that it's your content creation and your farm. You're doing continuing education and marketing and all of that. So you can kind of allocate between those two businesses that you have.
So one thing I like to tell people when they say something like, well, I'd love to buy that, but it's too expensive right now. If we can use it in our business, 100% business, you average will save about 30% of that cost on your taxes. So if you buy a $3,000 whatever, think of it as a 30% off sale, because that's how I sell things to my wife all the time. Babe, let me go buy this new tractor because
That's
it's
how you buy
30%
the
off.
tractor.
It's on
I
sale.
knew it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I knew it.
How can you say no then?
And that's how
basically
she
free.
call those livestock animals and stuff.
That's how she's getting some geese. Isn't that how that's going to happen?
Exactly.
Pretty much. Yep.
Oh man, that's
funny. Yeah, because we need some equipment, but that's definitely something we're timid about at this point in time. Like we do need a tractor, but
Yeah.
So I would like to talk about one other thing here with the taxes. What happens when we make profits? The taxes on self-employed people as farmsteaders or content creators or whatever wood shop your business you have, The taxes can be extremely painful when you start making profit. And you don't have to make a lot of profit to incur a lot of pain. It can be as small as a $10,000 profit. You might have to generate a $3,000 tax bill. So when you're self-employed as either a farmer or creator or whatever you're doing, you get to pay two taxes. One's not enough, so now you get to pay two. You get to pay income tax, and that's what we all pay all the time. Whether you're working, down at McDonald's or whether you're working out on the field, you're paying income tax on any revenue you're generating there. But the other tax you get to pay when you're self-employed is conveniently called the self-employment tax. And that is 15.3% of your net profit. So if you remember at the beginning, I said the name of the game is get your net profit down as low as you can. That's because that's what you're going to pay tax on. So you're paying income tax and self-employment tax. Most people are average about 15% income tax rate. Now, if you're also working a job where you're paid really well, you might be in the 20 or 30% income tax bracket, but your self-employment tax is fixed at 15.3%. So you could be paying on the low end 30% of your profits to Uncle Sam. The other way it causes a lot of pain is when you work for an employer in a traditional job, they take those taxes out little bites at a time with every paycheck. When you're self-employed, if you don't make estimated tax payments, they want it all at the end of the year when you file your tax return. And if you had a great year and made a $20,000 profit, well, 30% of 20 grand is $6,000. And if you're like most farmsteader, every penny you get goes right back into your farm. So when I say, all right, you owe $6,000, can you write them a check today? And you're like, can I send them a chicken? So you got to plan for it. That's why I tell people, I want you to know what your net income is on a monthly basis so you know where you stand. Now, if you have a loss from your farm, like most of us do, unfortunately, you don't have to really worry about it too much. But when you start making profits from your farms, especially if you're selling eggs these days, you might be making some good money now. You need to know where you stand. And when you see that money getting big and that pain point is starting to trigger, that's when you probably want to send in an estimated tax payment.
Okay. So how often should you be in contact with your accountant, CPA, or wherever to kind of see where you're adjusting that, and how should you put that money off to the side?
Well, really, unless you have some complicated questions, I mean, your accountant, CPA, tax guy only wants to see you once a year. But if you have questions, you absolutely should email, call, or whatever you do with your guy to talk to him about what's going on. And usually what they want to know, first question I'm going to say is, what is your net income from that business? Because then they're going to go ahead and do some calculations and say, okay, your estimated tax bill is going to be about this right now. Do you want to send in an estimate, or what do you want to do about it?
Okay, cool.
So you'll need to be keeping those records up until that point to be able to give that information.
Speaking of that, how long should you keep your tax documents before you should shred them?
Well,
forever.
Unfortunately.
There's many answers to that question.
Yeah.
The short and sweet answer is up to 3 years after the due date of the tax return, which is generally April 15th. So your 2022 tax return is due April 15th of 2023. So IRS has for 3 years after that due date to audit you. So that is the bare minimum I tell my clients is 3 years is the bare minimum. However, if there is some if you're doing something sketchy, they can extend that time period either up to 6 years or up to infinity if you're really just breaking the laws left and right. There is no statute of limitations, so they can audit you whenever they want to. But generally, after 3 years, if you haven't heard from the IRS saying, hey, we want to talk to you and try and figure some of this stuff out, you're probably safe. I tell my clients to hang on to your stuff for 5 years for your bank receipts and all that stuff, just to be safe. Now, a copy of your tax return, I tell you, you ought to scan it and put it out on OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever, just so you have it forever.
Okay, cool. At Hidden Oaks, they said they finally committed to getting a CPA and an accountant. Would you need both, or do you need one?
It's synonymous. We're the same things. Certified public accountant, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Not all CPAs necessarily do bookkeeping and vice versa.
Oh, but you
we're a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what are some questions that some of the viewers that are watching should they be asking to find out if they have a good accountant, or what are the
Well, if you want to know if you have a good accountant, you ask them if they have a tax loophole named after them. If they do, then they're a really good accountant. But
So what is your tax loophole?
well, you got a mediocre accountant here. But the thing they should ask them is, are you familiar with farm rules? Do you deal with small businesses? Because some CPAs, they target high net worth people, and they have a one-track mind of, we need to set up a trust and a estate plan and all that stuff. And a lot of people who aren't, the high net worth area don't really need all that work. You want to make sure they know the farm rules and the nitty gritty of running a small business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Liz wants to know, or I'm not sure I guess she's asking, are you all EAs? I don't know what an EA is.
I'm the EA.
That's an EA.
What's the EA? What does EA stand for?
It stands for enrolled agent, which
Okay.
means pretty much nothing.
You worked hard
no,
for that.
I mean it means nothing to the general public. People know what CPA means. EA, people don't know what it means. It's the term from the IRS for somebody who is allowed to prepare taxes and represent people.
But you guys are a powerhouse together, at least to us.
Oh yeah,
You're
powerhouse.
CPA,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a homestead, and you know the world that we are in. You know how to work
Right.
that stuff.
Right. Yeah. We farm. We have a homestead. We do all the things, and we have an accounting firm.
Yeah, and you are starting a YouTube channel as well. So to help
Right.
people do this kind of thing.
So tell everyone your YouTube channel name and what do you plan on.
She'll have to say the name. I can't say it right, so she'll have to say the name.
Forever to type it. I was like, how did you
But I think it's funny.
I think so.
Well, right. It's called Chicken Math and Oinkonomics.
I like
And-
it. I do.
Which goes with our farm of Peckers and Porkers is the name of our farm. So what we want to do with that is kind of do more of these kinds of conversations and education out there for the homesteaders, for people who are just kind of starting out or maybe have been doing it for a while, because there isn't a whole lot of information out there on how to do the business side of your farm. There's might be one or two episodes on someone's channel about, was this venture profitable, or things like that, but not the day in, day out. How do I keep track of this? How do I do my taxes and things like that? So that's what we want to focus on.
Yeah, this is a topic, and I'll just be transparent. I'm very intimidated by
A lot of people are.
okay, so I'm not
Yeah.
alone. in
No.
people like that.
No, it's I tell our clients all the time, taxes and bookkeeping aren't hard to do. It's not complicated, but it's also really, really easy to mess up really badly, really fast.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It took us a while to find y'all. We were looking for a while now, and
You fell in our lap because of our American bread.
I know, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, we found you.
it worked equally because we've been trying to search right now for almost 3 years to find somebody that understands the things that we deal with and everything. And now that we're in the homesteading aspect and y'all are going to the YouTube aspect, it basically go hand in hand.
Yeah,
with each
I
other.
would like down the road, and I'm just kind of speaking, for thoughts on this, because as we said before, we go to a lot of conferences. We're starting to, a lot of people that like put on conferences and stuff like that. And like he said, this is a subject that does not get talked about. You guys would be great speakers at some
Call
point.
me. We'll go.
That's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, tell those conferences to call me.
Yeah, I want to pitch this idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a whole list of things that we want to talk about. We just need to find the time to do it.
Yeah, I feel your pain. I feel it.
Yeah.
So that's good. I like how everything just worked out with everything. So this is y'all never was raised on a farm, correct?
No. You've had animals and done farm stuff before.
Later in life, not as a child. And my mom called me a little zoo animal, but I wasn't raised on a farm. But
That's probably putting it nicely.
yeah, she's called me a lot better. She called me a lot worse than the zoo animal. But so no, we kind of fell into this, and actually for the last 10 years or so, I didn't even have any animals, but we decided we wanted to get out of the city because we lived just right over there for a while here in Denison, Texas, and we bought some land so we could have some room. And then once we had the land, we said, hey, let's get a chicken.
Why not?
And now we have 100+ chickens, 9 pigs, a bunch of turkeys and ducks, and we've just gone crazy.
Figure out this chicken math.
It confused me. I don't know how it happened. And they're 30%. Every time we go to Tractor Supply, the chickens are 30% off, so we buy them.
There you go. And plus with the tax, you get another 30% off.
Right.
Can you tell, not that you would recommend, because we're not lawyers or anything, can you tell everyone the difference of the LLC, sole proprietor, or C corporation, stuff like that?
Or say
Sure. I can tell you the difference of them. Now, whether or not you need an LLC, that's a personal decision you ought to make with an attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I cannot give you legal advice. But a lot of people do form LLCs, and mainly it's for liability protection. In case something happens, they sue the LLC. Now, in reality, you guys are so tied into it that any lawyer worth their salt is not going to just sue your LLC. They're going to sue you, your mom, your grandma. They're going to sue everybody if something really, really bad happens. So whether or not you need an LLC is a decision you need to talk to an attorney for legal purposes. Now, for tax purposes, I can talk to you about an LLC. And forming an LLC and stopping there really doesn't have any tax benefits. But if you go a step further and form what's called an S corporation, that is where some tax benefits really come into play. And there are actually some benefits to maintaining your sole proprietorship, which is a sole proprietor is what you are when you haven't done any legal work. You're a sole proprietor. If you haven't incorporated or anything, you're a sole proprietor. And there's some great tax breaks for being a sole proprietor when you have younger children under 18. And that is you can pay them to work on your farm. You don't have to pay the FICA taxes because there's an exemption for children who work in a sole proprietor's business that is owned by their parents. So that means you could pay your children up to $12,000 and deduct it on your farm and save 30% of that $12,000. Now, the big thing to make sure is you can't just write your kids a $12,000 check and say, here, thanks for working on my farm. Make them fill out a timesheet, pay them, a reasonable rate of pay.
Keep the records.
Keep the records. You've got to make it look like a business because it is a business. If it's not a business, it's not deductible. So, but that is a great way. If you got a teenager who's helping you on the farm, start paying them so you can deduct what you pay them for working. And they won't have to pay tax on it. Now, if they have another job working at pizza place or something, they might have a little bit of tax issues to talk about if they're making more than $12,000 approximately each year. But if you're paying their only source of income, pay them as much as you can for the legitimate work that they're doing. Now, a lot of my parents say, well, I don't want to pay my kid $12,000 because they'll have a room full of video games and computers in no time. I tell them, well, pay them $12,000. I know you're spending more than $12,000 a year to raise your kid. I have 2 daughters. Those people are about to bankrupt me. So I know you're spending a lot of money raising your children. So make them buy their own stuff. If they're in football and got to pay football uniforms, make them pay for it out of their $12,000 or however much you pay them. So that's the way we get around that.
Life lessons, yes.
Now, so that's the benefit of staying a sole proprietor. Once you incorporate, you lose that perk right there. You can still pay them, but now you got to do the FICA taxes, and that's a whole other conversation we need to talk about. But if you're profitable, that's where being an S corp really comes into play. Because remember, we talked about the income tax and the self-employment tax. Once you become profitable enough and you can pay yourself a reasonable salary, it doesn't have to be high, it just needs to be reasonable. Anything over that you can take out as a draw or a distribution, and it's not subject to the self-employment tax. So you save 15.3% on that. So if your farm is only making $2,000 or $3,000 profit, I would say no.
Don't
You
worry about
probably,
it.
for tax purposes, you probably don't need a LLC or an S corp. Legal purposes, talk to your attorney. But for tax purposes, no, you probably don't. If your farm is making $40,000, $50,000 profit, now you might want to talk about becoming an S corporation so that you can get a paycheck for yourself, as small as you can reasonably get away with, and then save 15.3% on anything over that. You still make the same amount of money. So a lot of people will say, well, Joe, if I pay myself 20 grand, I need 30 grand to live on. I say, well, pay yourself 20 grand, but then take the other 10,000 out as draws or distributions. And that way you're still getting 30 grand, but you're saving 15.3% on that $10,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now,
It doesn't just have to be a farm to do that. You can do that with, content creators. I'm an S corp here for my CPA practice. So it can be any business or farm you can do this with. But you really got to do that reasonable compensation, and that adds
Exactly.
It's like when you get to that certain threshold of
Yes.
then S corp
yes.
hearing from you.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of paperwork that will go in with being a payroll, because you got to pay yourself at least monthly. You'll have to do electronic federal tax payments to deposit your FICA taxes and all that. You'll have to file quarterly reports, annual reports. So there's a little more paperwork that comes into play, but it's not that expensive to do. I charge my customers, maybe $500 or $600 a year to do all that paperwork for them, which is deductible to them, so they save 30% off. But that's why I would say you really want to get above that threshold you were talking about before you do it, because if you do it too early, you're just doing all this extra work for nothing.
Dang it. Oh.
So Hidden Oaks, our friend Hidden Oaks wants to know if you recommend sticking with a CPA in the state you live.
Not necessarily, because mostly what we're talking about is federal laws. Now in Texas, we are blessed enough to have super high property taxes, but no income taxes. So it really doesn't matter in Texas what your CPA does, because all we're worried about is federal. But if you live in a difficult state, and I don't mean that politically, I mean tax-wise.
Like
New York, I won't do California, New York, and Ohio tax returns. I refuse, because they're so complicated. If you live in one of those states, you might want to get a CPA who's knowledgeable in those states. But if you live in one of the 7 states that don't have an income tax, it really doesn't matter. Now I would just worry about whether or not your CPA knows about what you're trying to do. Now some states like Oklahoma are super easy for income tax. So we do Oklahoma tax returns all day long, and pretty much any CPA in the country I feel is probably reasonably competent enough to do an Oklahoma tax return. So in that case, it really wouldn't matter. So I would really just look at how difficult your state is.
So Hidden Oaks once again asks, is Florida a fair game for tax?
Florida is no income tax, so you don't have to worry about Florida. You probably have some nice property taxes, though.
Yeah, probably.
So if you're in Florida, you got the same thing as Texas does. So you can use a CPA who just knows the federal tax rules, and that's all you got to worry about.
There's a lot of accountants and CPAs and tax preparers who have virtual businesses, and we have clients from all over the country. I'm sure others do as well.
And Thailand, don't forget Thailand.
Okay, in Thailand.
Well, we've done stuff just like
But yeah.
here with
yeah.
you guys. Like we've never been to your office.
And that
Right.
hurts us deeply.
we made you come to our house.
Twice. We've been there twice.
So sorry.
Very nice, brother. Hidden Oaks said we are. I'm not sure what that is.
AGRR, so not too bad. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is. AGRR.
It's an acronym or something.
They're pirates?
I guess.
Oh, they're pirates. Okay, got it.
So how can if anybody, one of our viewers are interested in talking with y'all, how could they get a hold of y'all?
Go ahead.
Well, you're the social media person.
Because I'm such an expert.
Do you have a management title like me?
You can contact us through the YouTube channel, our email, through our farm, Peckers and Porkers Farm, Chicken Math and Oikonomics, or our business is Joseph Madden CPA, and that website is
JosephMadden.com.
JosephMadden.com. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
That's
they
a
said
good
it was an
Agricultural rural.
Ah, okay.
Oh.
So that would be a property tax thing, right?
Yeah, if your property taxes are high, you need to get your ag exemption in there really quick.
Yeah, well, that's what we're working on with
Yeah.
us.
Oh, and
We had
Texas is mean about it. Texas hates it when you try to convert property to ag use.
No, they want us to
5
do it.
years.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Yeah, we have to like show up every year, so we have
Yep.
to actually go
Yeah.
this year again
Yeah,
very soon. Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, that's so mean.
Yeah, and don't lose it, man. I tell you, one time we had the tax assessor drive up to our property. This is years ago when I lived at another place and I had goats and I had ag exemption for my goats. They drove up, looked in my field, couldn't see any goats, and so they revoked our ag exemption. So I had to go down there and fight for it. And I said, why didn't y'all call me? I would have showed you my goats. They're out there. He said, well, we drove up and we didn't see them, so we figured you sold them all. I'm like, dude, I got 10 acres out here. How would you have seen them from my driveway?
You have to want to see them.
Yes.
Oh man, that is horrible. Yeah, when we first got to this property, because I guess the original owner or seller of the house, he was allowing the Mennonites to cut his field for the wheat and the hay and stuff like that. So we thought he had
Hey.
already in there. We could just kind of piggyback off. Like, no, there's no records of it. I'm like, what?
Oh, no.
Dang it. Oh, that's a pain.
Yeah. So Winter Dragon, there was okay. They said we are rural protected, which is fun. You have to. Oh,
Emma, that was an inside joke.
yes,
That applied.
we went to
for
the
sure.
Homestead Festival last year, and you had to.
The signs were so little. All of us, we had an Airbnb together and like traveled together and stuff, and we got lost trying to find it. And it was funny because the joke ended up being like you have to want to see the sign. So
You have to be looking.
yeah.
Yes. Make sure that you read the size of the thing on the preview, not just look at the preview. Yeah.
For sure.
I'm not sure if this falls into y'all realm or into legal issues. With us having so many animals and possibly doing what they call agro-tourism and stuff like that, would it be beneficial for us to do a different schedule for each one of that area, or just keep the farm schedule?
Agro-tourism.
Or
Yeah.
just keep
Like
the-
an Airbnb, come live and stay on a farm for a weekend kind of thing.
and just come and have children come and do, or people that have never been on the farm. City
Like when
folks
we have
do.
an orchard or whatever, like,
Right.
Would it be better to? I guess that would be more of a legal issue instead of a tax issue.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're asking. Usually we tell people you don't have to create a new farm just because you're raising broccoli over here and then you go get a bunch of turkeys over here. You don't need a new farm for the turkeys alone. You can group all that together. But when you get into something that's radically different from just normal farming and ranching, then yeah, maybe we do. So like your agro-tourism, yeah, you probably would want a separate business, maybe even a separate LLC for that.
Okay.
To go from there, and it's, even go up to the S corp route for that. So it's not uncommon for people to have 2 or 3 S corps that will flow into their personal tax return.
So Hidden Oaks wants to know, we're talking about building a schoolhouse on our property. Do you suggest splitting parcels, whatever, to our house and then to the schoolhouse separately?
Yeah, because you get into that thing where we have to allocate stuff out. If you have one property tax bill that covers everything, including your personal residence, now we have to come up with some method to allocate out your property tax bill on what is personal and what is business. But if you have it as a separate parcel, it is a lot easier. We highly recommend that too for like your barn. Get a separate meter for your barn, a separate water meter. Unless the monthly cost or whatnot are too astronomical for that. But if you can get a separate meter, then it's easy to write that off as 100%. Whereas right now, you have to allocate it out. And how do we do that? How do we prove that we used 50% of our electricity in our barn? It's very hard. And if you get audited, your IRS auditor may not understand it. Might just say, no, we're going to disallow that thing. And then you're in trouble. But if you have a separate meter and say, well, that's my barn meter, this is my house meter, it's very easy to write off that barn meter.
Oh,
That's a great point. Yeah.
okay.
Point out. Okay.
and
And she,
she's
okay.
also
And yeah, and having a background in youth ministry and things like that, that having a separate parcel for your schoolhouse is probably a good idea for insurance purposes and things like that. Absolutely, like you're just saying, because anytime you have kids involved with coming on your property, there's extra hoops to jump through.
oh, okay. Yes, I guess she's
Oh, there goes the internet.
old school system. So
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. Emma from Sony's Place says, interesting. We already have separate meters here, one for the house and one for the shop. So yeah,
I guess you
Yeah.
guys have it set up that when you decide to launch your business LLC, because I know they both have separate types of like hobbies that could be something. That would be a good way for them
yeah.
to do that. Okay.
Cool. Well, I sure appreciate y'all spending some time with us and answering a lot of questions. Once again, if y'all don't follow them on Instagram, and y'all got a Facebook page, don't y'all?
Oh, for Peckers and Porkers.
Our farm does.
Yeah.
Peckers and Porkers Farms is on Facebook, and then on YouTube we have the Chicken Math and Oikonomics.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you guys just launched those. I see it being
Yeah.
Right.
because you're filling a niche that just isn't in existence when you
Yeah, we had spent a lot of time. We've been wanting to do a YouTube channel for a while, but we couldn't figure out where our niche was in the homesteading kind of realm. Just here's another couple of people, empty nesters who are starting a homestead. Watch us make mistakes, and
Yeah.
and we really, really don't know what we're doing when that comes.
Who
As far as the
does?
farm goes.
Something
But
that
this
a lot of
stuff
homesteaders
we
don't
do
know.
yeah, this is something we actually do know something about, and I think this is really the way for us to move forward. And so yeah, we've just kind of figured this out and are launching this all out as we have time.
Yep. And everything we talked about tonight, we're going to go in greater detail on our videos, like, the apps we use and how to use them and all that
Awesome.
stuff. How to prepare for your tax guy, because if you bring your tax guy a big box of receipts, I guarantee you he's going car shopping that day because he's going to charge you a fortune. But we'll show you how to save money at the CPA's office just by summarizing a little bit. It'll take you a little bit of time at the kitchen table, but it'll help him, it'll help you, and you'll save some money on
You
it.
work for free, we don't. Unfortunately.
A question I have is at some point on your channel, are you going to have like once a week or once a month some type of live to kind of like open up questions from people on this kind of thing?
I don't see why not.
Well, we'll have to see how it goes. I think my mom and my daughter might get tired of watching me live all the time. So if it's just those two watching me all the time, maybe not. But if we get enough interest in it, absolutely, we'd love to do this stuff
That
more
would be
often.
awesome.
Yeah,
Well, you can definitely have the grandbaby on there. That way they will have to watch.
Right?
That's right.
but if you guys do decide to do that kind of thing, always feel welcome to reach out to us because I would definitely market that because there is interest in the community to know stuff.
We appreciate that, and we do. We keep an eye on what you're doing, and we're like, oh yeah, we want to do that too.
We appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
you.
I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah. Christopher said, thank you so much. I got a lot of homework to do considering we're from Canada, eh?
Yeah, that's a little different.
okay.
Do y'all have any clients in the Canadian?
I try to avoid the international taxes, so I couldn't really help with Canada taxes.
No.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
have
we-
ex-family in Canada, but that's about as close as we go.
I have family in Canada.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, once again, thanks again
Oh,
for
thank you.
spending y'all time with our audience, and thank y'all for coming, asking all the questions.
And before we leave, I just want to let you guys know to please, because I know people are going to ask questions and in the comments below, I want you guys to engage with our audience in
Oh,
questions.
Sure.
We
All right.
want to
No
do
problem.
that because only you can answer some of the things,
Sure.
and I want them, to be familiar with you guys.
Yeah.
Sure, we appreciate that. No
All
problem.
right, you
problem.
guys have a good night.
Thank you. You
All
too.
All
right.
right. Thank you.